placing Vault 13's water chip in the year 2161 after a long and harrowing journey throughout the wasteland. Despite fulfilling his task, as well as saving the vault from the Master's army of super mutants, the Vault Dweller was banished by the Overseer, as he felt that his adventures in the wasteland would lead the Vault's population to abandon their home. This would lead to the Vault Dweller leaving Vault 13 and founding the settlement of Arroyo. After the residents of Vault 13 learned of the Overseer's decision, they sentenced him to death, allowing those who wished to leave the vault to do so. The remaining dwellers would live peacefully in the vault until 2241, when they were captured or killed by the Enclave, who left behind a pack of 240s, the NCR sought to reclaim the vault's computer parts, but were stopped by a group of squatters living on the surface of the vault. These squatters were secretly harboring a group of raiders known as the New Khans, who they believed were restoring the vault. However, the truth was that the New Khans were just using the squatters as a smokescreen to hide from the NCR. The situation was resolved after Tandy, the president, they know that this was all being orchestrated by the Overseers, as well as the vault doctors, who may have been drugging the residents, leading some to experience fits of aggression and psychosis. By the time of Fallout New Vegas, the vault had been taken over by powder gangers after they found the place abandoned, leaving the fate of the vault's residents unknown. Vault 21, located on the New Vegas Strip, housed an experiment which focused on the effects of excessive gambling. When the bombs dropped, 200 years would pass, and the vault's residents would develop a stable community which solved its problems through gambling. Eventually, in the year 2274, Robert House, the ruler of the New Vegas Strip, proposed a game of blackjack, where if he won, he would become the owner of the vault. Some of the vault's residents were skeptical and favored isolationism. However, others were in favor of opening the vault up. As a result, Mr. House tasked the residents in favor of opening up the vault to challenge bombs dropped doctors who may have been drugging the code, as well as a child reporting hearing high-pitched noises coming from his vault terminal, which was perhaps a form of subliminal messaging. Little did they know that this was all being orchestrated by the Overseers, as well as the vault doctors who may have been drugging the residents, leading some to experience fits of aggression and psychosis. By the time of Fallout New Vegas, the vault had been taken over by powder gangers after they found the place abandoned, leaving the fate of the vault's residents unknown. Vault 21, located on the New Vegas Strip, housed an experiment which focused on the effects of excessive gambling. When the bombs dropped, 200 years would pass, and the vault's residents would develop a stable community which solved its problems through gambling. Eventually, in the year 2274, Robert House, the ruler of the New Vegas Strip, proposed a game of blackjack, where if he won, he would become the owner of the vault. Some of the vault's residents were skeptical and favored isolationism. However, others were in favor of opening the vault up. As a result, Mr. House tasked the residents in favor of opening up the vault to challenge those who disagreed to a game of blackjack in order to decide what to do. Eventually, the dwellers in favor of opening up won the game, handing over the ownership of Vault 21 to Mr. House. Afterwards, Mr. House unexpectedly attempted to fill the vault with concrete in order to force the residents to move out of Vegas. However, one of the dwellers, Sarah, was able to convince him to turn the vault into a hotel. Convinced of its profitability, Mr. House transformed the vault into a hotel, and by 2281, the vault was still open for business, offering residents of New Vegas room and board as long as they had the caps. Vault 22, located in the Mojave Desert, was intended as a research facility which tested genetically modified crops that were developed at Big Mountain, a think tank known for its unorthodox experiments. After the bombs dropped and the scientists began experimenting on the crops, they accidentally released an outbreak of a modified fungal infection which would lead to the vault being overrun with vegetation. The vault's residents all would eventually succumb to the infection, as the fungus they were experimenting on would colonize their bodies and use them as hosts, turning them into horrifying creatures known as spore carriers. Located somewhere on the west coast of the United States, Vault 29 was intended to house a population of rich children under the age of 15. The vault would be controlled by a Zax AI supercomputer, which would be programmed to raise the children with the aid of robotic helpers. Not much is known about the fate of Vault 29, other than the fact that Harold, a recurring character in the Fallout series, is said to have originated from there. Vault 34, located in the Mojave Desert, hosted an experiment granting its inhabitants unrestricted access to an armory full of weapons and explosives. This would cause a very gun-centric culture within the vault, and seeing the potential for disaster, the Overseer would lock up the vault's armory. And because of this, the residents protested, as they felt that they had the right to their weapons, and thus, the population was divided into two groups. The first group would escape the vault and head north, where they would discover the Nellis Air Force Base and eventually become the Boomers. The remaining dwellers would be trapped inside by the Overseer, leading to a riot that damaged the vault's reactor. This would end up filling the vault with radiation, turning its remaining residents into feral ghouls. As of 2281, Vault 34 is nothing more than a ghoul-infested, irradiated hole in the ground stocked with all the weaponry that one could need. Not much is known about Vault 43, as it was featured only in the Fallout comic titled One Man and a Crate of Puppets. All that is known about the vault is that its inhabitants consisted of 20 men, 10 women, and a panther. Vault 51, located in the forests of Appalachia, conducted an experiment in which a Zax 1.3C supercomputer would test the vault's residents in order to determine who is best fit for the role of Overseer. The computer was primarily taught by a man named Sergeant Robert Baker, who would advise the computer on what made the best leader. As time went on, Baker attempted 2 separate times to hold an election. But when no one could decide on a leader, the computer deemed elections pointless and would forego this method of selecting the Overseer. Baker would then commune with the AI, telling it that a leader was someone who stepped up in times of crises. The AI would misinterpret this message and begin to produce a series of crises for the dwellers in order to see who was most fit to lead. These crises included, but are not limited to, changing the rules of a talent show halfway through to make it so that the losers would be forced to move out of their bedrooms and into bunk beds, making the dwellers compete in rigged casino games, engineering a food shortage, convincing the dwellers that houseflies were infesting the vault, layering the vault alarms while the residents were sleeping, switching their coffee with decaf, and manipulating the dwellers into cheating on their significant others. These events ultimately manipulated the remaining inhabitants to turn against each other, leading to multiple deaths. One day, after the body of a dweller named Helen was found, the vault residents began a frenzy. This led to the dwellers massacring each other, leaving only one survivor alive, a man named Reuben Gill. Since he was the only dweller left,